Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm coming from you from sunny Birmingham, even though you can't see it because of closed blinds. So, here to talk about monitoring Node.js with open source. It's quite important in reality. So, I am Mike Elsmore. I'm developer advocate for Logs.io. If you wish to get hold of me, there is my email and my Twitter handle, which also happens to be my GitHub as well. So feel free to send any queries during or after this session. So what is the problem this is covering? Well, it's Node.js. Well, in reality, it's just JavaScript, because some of these can be applied to the front end as well. If you told me 10 years ago you'd be seeing JavaScript everywhere, I'd have probably laughed. But now you do. And we're not just shipping like one huge chunk of it every so often. We're more like, in reality, shipping hundreds of smaller components, be this in Docker containers with full Express stacks or Happy stacks. We're shipping Lambdas, we're shipping Azure functions, we're shipping components, pieces, different bits to different places. We've got back-end workers, we've got front-end code, and all of this is producing data that we need to keep an eye on. So we've got all these hundreds of components, and there's a lovely little meme that I've been using recently to describe it, which is just lambdas everywhere. Because when you start shipping one lambda, you end up shipping hundreds of them. I personally really like lambdas because it allows me to play with tech quite quickly and quite nicely. So when it comes to monitoring our systems, we're all quite used to just dumping stuff out to console with JavaScript. So just going console.log or like attaching it to a log file and just leaving it be, just having it dump out. Or at least that's what a lot of people are in the earlier part of the 2010 era, where we were just throwing stuff somewhere else to think about it later. But what's the next step? How can we monitor our systems more effectively and with more insight into what's going on? Well, that would be, in my opinion, observability. So it's not a new term, it's not an old term, but just for those who aren't aware, here's what it is. It's made of three components: metrics, logs, and traces. Logs being the historical information specifically on what's happened within your system. Metrics are more of a what is going on right now. And traces, which we're not going to really be covering too much in this session, because 20 minutes is not long enough to cover everything, unfortunately. Traces are the end-to-end flow of data and information, how your system is interconnected. This is hugely important in large distributed systems that we see these days. Everything from the wonderful graph at Netflix of all of its microservices and all things like that. It's quite important for us to have knowledge of not only what the individual component is doing, but what the side effects of all of them are. So a lot of people are going, I don't need this. The JavaScript I do have, it's not really doing a lot. It's just sat there, or it's only the front end, or it's a little Lambda validation on an S3 bucket, or it's just a connector for the Lewis APIs to connect to something else, so we don't really care. Well, in reality, probably should, because even if it's a small component or piece that you don't think of every day, it's still within your system, and you should probably be keeping an eye on what your overall system is doing. So let's start with the easy mode. This is the one that everybody's pretty much always aware of and has access to and has played with before, especially when things have gone bang. So event logs, it's fully easy mode. This is just immutable data with timestamp attached to it. The common structures here, plain text, so just strings in the usual formatted version, say the Apache log format or something like that. We then have structured, so that is usually JSON objects. We're all used to seeing these as well. You can in some systems see them as XML, which I always find a little odd because that's a lot of extra gumph to be sent over the wire quickly. And then there's binary. Most commonly in protobufs, it's not really, I haven't seen it recently in a lot of systems, but I did used to see it in some programs which usually just dump out protobuf information. which oddly enough I never actually debugged against, just saw what the output of some of the applications I was playing with were. As we're talking about this in an open source context, the best open source that we have available to us, for most of us, and especially me at Logs.io, is the ELK stack, which is Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. Logstash isn't used that much anymore, especially with the advent of the Beats system, especially within the logging service, which is FileBeat, which just grabs and streams a log file to the Elasticsearch. So Elasticsearch is the storage engine allowing you to do indexes and looking up on the different levels of log you have. A Logstash is the transformation and shifting component, which thus Beats is as well. And Kibana is the visualization engine, the way you can look at your data and get more insight into it rather than just seeing lots of logs which you need to search through. Then we've got system metrics. Now, not completely around monitoring, but is, in my eyes, still a very important part of it because it's telling you what is going in your system right now. So these are, once again, immutable data points, but these are more numeric information. Log data is what's happened, and it's most of the time it's strings of information and long formats, failed files, memory overusage, or stuff that it's a string format, something that you end up having to search for. These are more numeric, more defined values that you can use. So